One of the best devices of 2022 was the Miyoo Mini, which hit that sweet spot of pocketability and performance. It's just adorable. The Mini sold like hotcakes, so well in fact that the company reportedly ran short of the screens. So then we got the Miyoo Mini Plus, with the same look and performance, but a little bigger. I don't have the Plus at the moment, but it's about the same size as this one, the Anbernic RG35XX. Well, for what seemed like years, Miyoo hinted that they were working on a new device that reproduced the magic of the original Miyoo Mini, but in a horizontal form factor. That device finally arrived in 2024, and it's what we're looking at here today. It's a pocketable device that can emulate up to PS1 and Game Boy Advance, with a style reminiscent of Nintendo's short-lived Game Boy Micro. This is the Miyoo A30. Stick around till the end of the video and I'm going to share how I got this thing on sale for around 20 bucks. Let's start with the colorways on offer. There's the red and gold version, which mimics the original Famicom design from Japan. There's the black and white NES style. The black model has a gray front and darker red A and B buttons, and what they call gray is really similar but with some lighter accents. I think these actually all look great, but I'm an 80s kid, so I went with the NES controller style, no question. The A30 ships in this sturdy zipper case, which offers some decent protection if you're going to carry it around not loose in your pocket. There's an instruction manual in here, of course, a USB-C to USB-A charging cable, and this is really helpful. The device doesn't have an audio jack, but it did include a USB-C to 3.5mm audio adapter in case you want to use headphones. So just keep this thing handy. The device fits very snugly in its case, to the point that the first time I opened this, I had to work at it for a while actually to figure out how to get it out. So here's what we're looking at. We have this nice feeling D-pad in the top position. These nice big buttons. I really love that the buttons here are not the teeny tiny ones like we've seen on devices like the Retroid Pocket 3 and 3 Plus. Here on the Miyoo, they're big and soft. They feel good. There's a single analog stick over here. That'll come in handy for some PS1 games. We might also be able to get some N64 and even Dreamcast running here. We'll talk about that later. And a single mono speaker on the front. Up top, we have L1 and L2, R1 and R2 inline shoulder buttons. There's a USB-C charging port, volume up and down, and this is the menu button. We'll see how that works when we turn the thing on. Power button is over here on the right side of the device, along with a couple of LED indicators. The back is nice and clean. We've got Miyoo's logo and some specs here, nothing on the right. And the bottom is where we're going to put our micro SD card. The OS itself is on the internal memory, which is why I can power it up without an SD card and navigate the menu and settings. There's just no games. The A30 also has Wi-Fi, which is going to be helpful in scraping our box art and tracking retro achievements. And its specs also list Bluetooth, although I'm not sure why you would need Bluetooth on this. There's no video out, so if you're looking for a handheld that you can also dock to a TV, you'll want to look elsewhere. On first impression, the form factor and size of the A30 is great. It feels great. It's actually lighter than I expected. The design here is obviously to be pocket-friendly rather than particularly ergonomic, but I could certainly see myself playing on this for some longer play sessions. That's because it's light. This bright 2.8-inch screen is more than enough for most 8-bit and 16-bit games. And the horizontal layout of the A30 makes it easy to grab onto the sides. One of the reasons that I've ended up not using the original Miyoo Mini on a daily basis is because it feels awkward to hold a tiny vertical device in this position with my big man hands, at least for more than a few minutes at a time. The other reason I don't use the Mini very much actually is the build quality. I love this thing, don't get me wrong, but like a lot of Chinese handheld makers, Miyoo makes a nice looking device, but they don't have a sterling reputation for quality control. The Mini ended up incredibly fragile, and we've seen report after report in the community of broken screens and devices that seemed to brick after it was plugged in with the wrong charger or a firmware update failed. This happened to me actually. I had to immediately order a replacement board for the Mini and then learn how to solder the SD card reader and even then it still wouldn't work properly. This one is only turning on right now thanks to the kindness of a community member on Discord who got me out of a soft brick situation with the firmware. So now that it's working, I kind of don't want to touch it for fear that it will break again. So in my estimation, the A30 is leaps and bounds ahead here. The build quality seems really solid, and there haven't been nearly the quality control issues with this device. I don't think I should toss it around or anything, but I think it could at least survive a short drop onto a carpeted floor, which you can't necessarily say about the Mini. No, I'm not going to test that for you, but the plastic housing and the fact that the screen is recessed into the housing give me some confidence that I can at least toss this into a backpack for the day. Let's look at these controls again. Going back to comfort, it really helps that the face buttons are nice and big and easy to press. Compare these with something like the Switch Lite, which is fairly comfortable because of its size, but it has pretty tiny buttons. Or here's the Retroid Pocket 3 Plus, which also has small buttons, but they're very stiff. I definitely get some finger fatigue when I play an intense button mashing game for too long on this one. I played almost all the way through Hollow Knight on this device, and it was a real workout. But the A30 has big buttons that are soft to the touch. The D-pad is also very soft and easy to press. After using the device for a few days, this had some trade-offs. The D-pad is easy to move in the 4 cardinal directions and to hit diagonals, but it has more travel than I'm used to with other devices. That means the D-pad has to be pressed farther down into the shell before it will register the input. That's not a big deal when playing Mario and holding down the D-pad to run left to right, but playing something like Tetris, where you have to be able to rapidly press left and right to position your piece, that's another story. So it's not a great D-pad. I would say it's comfortable, but not all that well suited for every type of game. Now, how about the screen? This is a 2.8-inch IPS display with a resolution of 640 by 480. That gives us a pixel density of about 285 pixels per inch, which is very good for something so small. There are 10 brightness settings, and while it doesn't get especially bright, I think it's plenty, so long as you aren't trying to do a lot in direct sunlight. It's not as bright as my original Miyoo Mini screen, though generally I'd say the A30 has a better color balance. The 4:3 aspect ratio is well suited to the sorts of home consoles of the 80s and 90s that you're going to be playing here. Game Boy has more of a squarish screen, so you'll get a little bit of pillar boxing, and Game Boy Advance is a 3:2 aspect ratio, so you'll get a little bit of letterboxing. I think Game Boy looks great, and of course these games were made for the smaller screen of a handheld, so they fit well here. We're going to briefly try PSP in a minute, but that's a 16:9 device, so if we can get any games to run, the letterboxing will be even more severe on this little screen. Now, for audio, I'm going to keep my expectations in check for a micro device that costs around $35. These budget handhelds almost always use a mono speaker, which is what we have here, and they tend to be lacking in bass. That's just to be expected. We're pretty much just hoping that it doesn't sound too quiet, too tinny, and that the audio doesn't crackle, which is a sure sign of either poor components, incompetent wiring, or just lousy software emulation. Fortunately, the A30 doesn't have any of these problems. For those 8-bit and 16-bit soundtracks, this is perfectly adequate. How about the operating system? Well, instead of the stock OS, I want to talk for a few minutes about Spruce. I bought this device without an SD card, and when I loaded up my ROMs and put my own card into the A30, oddly enough, the stock OS wouldn't show any games. I even tried refreshing the game list, and I couldn't get it to detect anything. I was planning to upgrade to Spruce anyway, and that fixed my issue right away. Everything started working right away, so I actually don't have any experience with the stock OS. So what is Spruce? The short version is that it's a custom firmware developed by the retro emulation community to optimize the experience on this particular device. Things like menus and save states, sleep mode, and optimized settings for the different emulators. It also adds some tools, and it's generally going to help you get the most out of your device. So I definitely recommend the upgrade. Spruce is not itself an OS, it's sort of a set of improvements built on top of the stock OS. So it's really simple to do. It's just a matter of downloading the file that's linked in the description below from the Spruce GitHub, unzipping it, and copying the files over to your SD card. One of the handy things we'll find in Spruce is a built-in scraper to add box art. And connecting to Wi-Fi and scraping my games did a decent job. There's a lot missing here right now, but it definitely found most of them. That's probably at least partially my fault, since I think I used an older ROM set with some irregular file names. It's going to use that file name to try and match against the database and figure out what game you have. With other Spruce tools, you can do things like change the boot logo, use SyncThing to back up your saves, quickly switch between games with automated state saving and loading, and access the real-time clock for games that use it, like Pokemon. So, because I couldn't access any games with the stock OS, I didn't end up spending any time with it. So I can't speak to how much the custom firmware improves the overall experience, just that Spruce is great. It's really easy to navigate, find the settings, get in and out of games, and create save states. So now let's look at what's under the hood, and then we'll get into some games and see how they play. The Miyoo A30 has an all-winner A33 chip with 4 Cortex A7 cores and the Mali 400 graphics processor plus 512 megabytes of RAM. That should be enough to emulate most PS1 and GBA games without a hitch. Super Nintendo and older should run flawlessly. Like I said, we might even be able to get a few N64, Dreamcast, and PSP games to run, which is where that analog stick will come in handy, as long as we're not expecting buttery smooth performance. Don't buy the A30 to emulate these systems. Consider any games that you can get running to just be a bonus. So as you can see, anything from this generation, right? This is the 80s and early 90s, runs flawlessly. Let's move on to those systems that are going to make this chip work a little harder.
Color indicates his power. When he eats butterflies, he stays strong. Like me. Sure.
Again, this device is doing pretty well at emulating what we're throwing at it here. I think you're safe with anything up to PS1. Some of those more intense, more demanding games might start to chug a little bit, you might lose a few frames, but on the whole, it's performing really well. Let's move up a level now and look at N64, Dreamcast, and PSP. These are harder systems to emulate, of course, so they're going to be more marginal cases for the A30. Some of them will run at what you would consider playable speeds, but of course you're not going to get the whole catalog here. Anything from these systems that we can get to run is just a bonus. And it's pretty amazing that a device this small at this price point can do any of this. So if you can't tell, I really love this little thing and what it can do, but there are a few hiccups that I want to talk about. The first one is heat. The most common issue reported in the emulation community since the A30 was released last spring is that the back of the device can get uncomfortably warm, particularly after playing more demanding games for a significant length of time. There may be some heat dissipation issues here, so if you're looking to pick one up, that'll be worth paying attention to. I would say it's not a deal breaker. I haven't experienced this at all myself, but I also haven't been playing 32-bit systems for hours at a time. If that's most of what you're looking to play, you might look for a device with a little bit more power. Now, if you're the sort who wants to do a little DIY work, yeah, you could open up the device pretty easily and add a thermal pad or some thermal paste. For my money, I have other devices for those Gen 5 and Gen 6 games, and I'm pretty much more likely to play 16-bit and older stuff from my childhood on the A30. The spruceOS team also recommends turning off Wi-Fi and setting the CPU performance mode to smart to help with any heat issues that you might be experiencing. This is going to avoid overtaxing the CPU and pushing it to run when really a brisk walk will do. Next is just a little bit of stuttering. I'm not sure what's going on here, but I noticed a very slight performance issue while I was playing Tetris. This game has a very familiar and predictable flow state, and a few times I felt it disrupted by a slight delay that felt like micro-stutters. Now, the A33 chip should be more than powerful enough to emulate this game, so I'm not sure what the explanation is. I'm going to keep testing it and maybe swap out my Tetris ROM, and also see if this stuttering crops up anywhere else. Apparently, I'm not the only one seeing the occasional stutter, and this user in the SBC Gaming subreddit also suggested disabling the Wi-Fi. That would be a real bummer based on how great retro achievements are to have on a pick-up-and-play pocket device like this one. The responsiveness of the D-pad might be something else to pay attention to here. As I said, the D-pad on the A30 is a little soft. I have to push down further than I expect to get an input. That's only going to be annoying for certain games that require rapid inputs back and forth. Again, if you're playing something like Mario or Kirby and you're just running right for the whole level, you're probably not even going to notice it. And finally, let's talk about the battery. In my first few days of using the A30, I've been having a hard time keeping it charged. And I suspect this is my fault. I think those first few days that I had the device, I wasn't doing a full shutdown. So I took it to a family gathering and powered it on, and I got a few levels into one game of Tetris, and the device started vibrating to warn me that the battery was low and it was about to power itself off. Now, that rumble warning is a nice feature. It gave me time to pause, make a save state, exit the game, and power down the device before it died on me. But it's pretty inconvenient to know I have a device on me at all times, but then when I actually want to use it, it only has like 15% battery life. Again, this might be my fault, so I'm going to make sure I know how to do a full shutdown and don't just sleep the device. So here's the deal that I got. You can pick up the Miyoo A30 on AliExpress. Just make sure you're buying from a reputable store with some sales history and some positive ratings. Also look at the listing to make sure that it has free shipping. As of the making of this video, there are listings typically in the range of $30 to $35. When I bought it, I found a listing at $28, and then I added a couple of screen protectors to bump my total up over the $30 threshold, and then I used one of these influencer coupon codes to knock $9 off the price. These codes don't always work, and as of the end of 2024, they've kind of dried up a bit. That $9 off 30 hasn't been around for several weeks. Hopefully they'll come back, and when they do come back, they have limited stock. But if you try them all and none work, you could wait a few days and try again, or just use a different code. $6 off 30 is a little bit more common. And it's worth saying AliExpress has sales all the time. And depending on the sale, you might see codes for $3 off, $6 off. But just try the influencer codes first. These are usually a better deal. Shipping from China to the US and other countries typically takes around 2 weeks. I got the A30 a little faster. It only took about 10 days to get to me on the west coast of the US. Just remember that if you buy it with an SD card included, those come with game ROMs that are poorly organized and pretty low quality. The cards themselves also have a high failure rate, so you'll want to pick up a name brand SD card, put Spruce on it, and begin to curate your own collection of games. That's about it for this video. I waited a good long while to grab the A30 at a good price, and I'm pretty happy with it overall. While the controls could be a little tighter, this is going to be my new pocket device that I'll always keep in my jacket for those times I'm stuck waiting in a parking lot while picking up my kids. But on the software side, I'm definitely glad I waited. The first reviews for the A30 were pretty unforgiving of what was apparently some half-baked firmware, and the community's custom firmware, in combination with that price drop, has made this a great purchase. So what do you think about the Miyoo A30? Is this a device you're looking to pick up, or do you have one already? What would make this one perfect? Leave your thoughts down in the comments. Our channel is brand new, so subscribe and leave a like if you want to help RetroDoc grow. Thanks for watching, keep gaming, and I'll see you in the next one.